Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome everybody to this session, and thank you for attending the ISMTE 2021 Global Virtual Event and joining us here for the session on increasing the efficiency of the peer review process, new approaches. I'm Manuel Breuer. I'm the Deputy Editorial Manager at the FEPS Journal, a multidisciplinary nonprofit society journal that is part of FEPS Press of the Federation of European Biochemical Societies. Hosting this session, I volunteer with ISMTE in the European Subcommittee, and I'm based in Cambridge in the United Kingdom. Please let us know in the chat where in the world you're joining us from. So a few housekeeping notes. We're going to hold questions until after the presenters have finished. But of course, you're free to submit your questions at any time. And please also indicate which presenter you're asking by typing an @ sign before the name. And you can also upvote questions from other attendees you find interesting. Of course, we try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. Before we get started, let me just show our conflict of interest statement, which is none for this session. And we like to thank our sponsors, that is Quell, Scholastica, ACS, A-Type, Origin Reports, and AGA. And of course, now for this session today on peer review, we're talking about, well, maybe one of the most crucial aspects of scientific publishing, really the linchpin, where in an ideal world, the peer review process serves as a quality control step for the community and leads to an optimized final version of the respective manuscript. But of course, we've seen a sharp rise in scientific output worldwide, and of course, an increase in scientific journals, and that puts immense pressure on the various stakeholders in this process, so authors, editors, reviewers, and publishers. So it's therefore imperative to consider and trial new peer review models that improve time and effort that is spent for all of these stakeholders in the process without actually compromising quality. And so that is the goal of today's session, to introduce to you new ways that publishers, journals, and of course, ultimately also reviewers and authors go to improve this process. So today's speakers, we have, we have Anne Goldstein, who is lead editor of community review at Cell Press, and did her PhD at Stanford Medical School, followed by a postdoc at Children's Hospital Boston. And since 2012, she's with Cell Press, first at Neuron, and since 1919 with Cell. She's worked on several cross-journal initiatives, such as, of course, the community review, but also the introduction of STAR methods at Cell Press. Secondly, we have Brooke La Flamme, who is the chief editor of communications biology at Springer Nature. Brooke did get her PhD from Cornell University and also did her postdoctoral research at Weill Cornell Medical College, and joined the editorial team of Nature Genetics in 2013. In 2017, she left to become the chief editor of the budding journal then, Communications Biology, and she will talk to us about the guided open access model at Springer Nature. Then thirdly, we have William Rossi, who is the business development manager at FileStage. William has worked extensively in scholarly publishing for Wiley as a senior account manager, BMJ sales manager, licensing manager at Springer Nature, and now as the development manager at FileStage Thieme Group. And together with William, we have Kathrin Ulbrich, who is the executive editor at Thieme Chemistry. She received her PhD in chemistry at the University of Regensburg in Germany. And since 2015, she has been the executive editor for Thieme, for the Thieme Chemistry journal, Synlett, Synthesis, Synfacts, and SynOpen. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Anne for the first presentation on Cell Community Review. Take it away.
Great, thanks so much for the introduction. And I'm really excited to be here. Let me start up my sharing. Great, I think you can see my slides now. Is that correct? Everyone's good? Great. Thanks again for the invitation. And I'm here to talk today, as Manuel mentioned, about the community review. The community review was inspired from a brainstorming session at an editor retreat that we had at Cell Press a few years ago now, where we expressed interest in a different way of interacting with our authors. Instead of an editor representing one journal and making a decision with a focused perspective, we envision using our experience and knowledge about our broader journal portfolio to help authors find the right home for their paper more efficiently and effectively than the current mechanisms of submitting a paper to one journal at a time. The community review includes 20 of our life and medical science journals shown here. It's open to all authors with no fee. When an author submits, we ask them a series of questions, including what journals they're most interested in and whether they would be open to editorial recommendations or not. We highly encourage our authors to send us a pre-submission inquiry prior to formal submission, as we found that the pilot is best suited for manuscripts where more than one of the author's choices match up with the interests of more than one of the participating journals. This slide here shows a summary of the workflow with the community review. As I mentioned, the author submits indicating their journals of interest. Then the manuscript is assigned to an editor who reads the full manuscript and writes up detailed notes with recommendations for how to proceed. These notes are the basis for our editorial discussions from the author requested journals. And this consultation occurs with the journal editors. And these editors are typically the senior editors or editors-in-chiefs who also have full access to the manuscript in case they have any questions or would like to consult the paper directly as well. If the manuscript is not suitable for review or only suitable for review in journals that were not requested by the author, we either send the manuscript back to the author or contact them with additional options to consider. When editorial recommendations match up with 2 or more of the author interests, we invite reviewers to evaluate the manuscript on behalf of these journals. The makeup of the review panels are generated in close consultation with the journal editors so that we ensure that we have all the necessary expertise to inform our decisions. So when all the reviews are complete, very typical to when you submit to one journal at a time, the community editor summarizes up the review, writes up our recommendations, and we discuss the next steps with each journal editor before we communicate our decisions and potential options for revisions with the authors. Depending on the reviews and of course the editorial discussion, authors have more than one option for revision, ideally. And we encourage our authors to contact us with their revision plans after they've had a chance to go over all the reviews and potential things that they're able to do to address them. So we can provide them with as much additional guidance as we can from the journal editors. We can connect them with the journal editors and also ask questions of our reviewers and provide them any kind of guidance if they have questions about the process as a whole. The authors submit the revised manuscript to the community for a formal re-review or editorial discussion of the revised manuscript. And that the manuscript is provided an option to be published with more than one journal, then the authors have that really great option to make that decision choice of where are they going to publish with us at Cell Press. And then once they make the decision to which journal they'd like to publish with, the journal editors take over from there, helping the authors finalize the paper for formal acceptance and publication with them. This slide highlights some of the papers that we've been excited and privileged to publish via the community review. The first paper on the left is actually the very first submission to the community, and it happened to be published in Molecular Cell at the beginning of 2021. And the 3 other papers on the right are papers that just came out from the community review. And you can see that they cover a range of the fields that the community covers and also different journals within the portfolio. And on the bottom are some of the journals that have papers in press. So stay tuned for them coming out. One of the ways that we're measuring the pilot is the number of papers that are accepted that come in via the submission process. And I can say just, we don't have the final numbers, but it looks to be a very similar number to when you submit directly to a journal, which is great. We're not seeing papers that are handicapped in any way by coming through the community process. And we're seeing submissions from different career stage researchers, people we know and have worked with in the past, and new PIs as well. So this is really great, and we're very excited by the whole prospect. And the next slide highlights some of the direct feedback we've also been collecting from our authors and reviewers. This comes via surveys that we have throughout our system, as well as direct communications we have with our authors and reviewers. I should say the the numbers are pretty small. I think people are kind of fatigued of providing feedback on surveys. But overall, I just want to highlight some of the major positives that we've seen, which is that authors seem to be interested in the concept. They like the idea of being able to have their paper considered at multiple journals all at once. And they're looking for a swift publication and turnaround times for obvious reasons. But they do have concerns about the process. Some of the things that we've heard from authors, even before they submit, was whether or not the quality of the editorial consideration would be the same as submitting to one journal directly. And we've tried our best to assure them that we are doing that we're consulting completely with the editors for each journal. we're having deep discussions about their paper. And if they want, they also have a direct access to the journal editor. So we want to, as much as possible, have this experience look and feel like working directly with the journal, but having all these other options as well of thinking about a paper and being potentially for more than one venue for revisions. The other thing that we've heard from reviewers in particular is that they like the idea, but it's daunting to consider a paper for more than one journal at a time. We provided them with a structured reviewer form that's not required, but encouraged, because they do have specific questions for particular journals. But we found that reviewers either choose not to use the form, or they still say, we're not quite sure how to evaluate a paper for more than one journal. So this is something that the kind of feedback that we're getting, that we're trying to think about new ways to help build on this feedback, to make sure that at the end that we're giving authors good quality feedback from our reviewers and our editors in a timely fashion, so that we really are getting the most out of this project. And the last slide highlights some of the major take-homes that I'm going to conclude with and share with you today, is that from this 1-year pilot that we've done so far, we really learned that authors really like the concept and they're interested in the project. But the pathway is not really for every single paper. It really works best when there are 2 or more journals interested in the manuscript that match up with the author's interests. We've also learned from the process that authors like to tell us which journals they're particularly interested in. And so when they submit, we give them all the options that we have available for them. Because if we offer authors journals that they didn't express interest in, we do see authors withdrawing from the process at a similar rate to when we offered authors transfer options after a paper has been rejected from a journal. So this is something that we've definitely learned from the project. And we want to make sure that authors know that if they choose to withdraw, they can come back to us. And if they find that the option is something that they'd like to reconsider down the road. And we've actually seen a great take-up of that. And that's also highlighted to us their interest in the project. We've seen authors submit, withdraw, and then come back again. Or we've seen authors submit new papers again and again. So we know that people really like the idea. And then once they actually go through the review process, we've seen that the pathway to publication has been very positive, where we see about the same number of papers having options for revision as if they were submitting directly to a journal, or if not higher. As I mentioned, it's still early in the pilot. We've had a ramp up of submissions after we launched last September, and we're starting to see these papers come back now, and we can have a better idea maybe in a few months, how successful the pilot is in getting authors to the ultimate goal of having us help them have a quick and easy path to publication with Cell Press. And with that, I wanted to invite you to stay tuned for future iterations of the community review. And thank you again for the invitation here today, and also to acknowledge all the help and support we have for this pilot to happen. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anne. I have a very quick question, because you're talking about, of course, a pilot. So are you currently thinking of running this 12 months or 24 months? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so we just we're going to continue it for an additional 12 months. And then from there, decide what the framework will be going forward. The nice thing about the pilot is that we've had the opportunity to really play at the edges and see what works. And so it's really been a fun collaboration with myself, my team, and all the journal representatives to see, the best way that we can communicate with our authors and with each other and reviewers.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And now for a second talk, it's Brooke La Flamme who will talk us through guided open access model at Springer Nature.
Yeah, thank you, Manuel. It's really exciting to be here and really cool to hear about what's going on in other journals as well. So this is going to sound very familiar because it is a bit similar to Cell Community Review, but it has some distinctions as well. We started guided open access. So first I'll tell you a little bit about Nature Portfolio to give you some background on this, and then talk about guided open access, how it's working, and what we want to do in the future. So you may already know, but Nature Portfolio consists of Nature itself, the Nature research journals, and then our open access journals, Nature Communications, which is multidisciplinary, the communications journals, which I'm part of. So there's biology, physics, chemistry, and several more at this point. And then scientific reports, which is our more sound science journal. So the graph here is showing like increasing levels of selectivity as you go from bottom to top. At the beginning of 2021, all Nature research journals, so not the reviews journals, but Nature and every other Nature branded journal became a transformative journal. So that's now 33 journals in total. And authors can decide at the point of acceptance whether they want to publish open access or not. The open access option is 9,500 euros, which we recognize is quite high. And that reflects the very selective nature of these journals. But importantly, we did this because we wanted our journals to be compliant with all funder mandates. So everything else remains the same editorially. So there were a number of different motivations behind guided open access. So this was a pilot that launched in January. And similar to, I assume, the discussions going on at Cell Press, we had been toying with this idea also of having a more centralized peer review service for authors. And so with the idea that we would make the publishing process simpler, quicker, more efficient for authors, and potentially more cost effective. So one of the things we wanted to do is to help authors who want to publish in those Nature branded journals to not have to pay quite so much. And so the cost for the editorial evaluation portion and the publication have been uncoupled. So what this means is that when the paper is sent out to review, the authors are levied the editorial assessment charge, which the costs are shown here. If the paper is then published in one of our journals, there's a top-up fee. And if it's in one of the research journals, then that top-up fee brings the total to about 50% of what the original cost would have been. Part of what goes into the editorial evaluation and assessment is this editorial assessment report, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail in a moment. But first, how does it work? So as a pilot, we tried to keep it relatively small. So authors can submit through Nature Physics, Nature Methods, or Nature Genetics. They can then be assessed. Their manuscript is then assessed by all of the journals in that referral path. So for Nature Physics, for example, it's Nature Physics, Nature Communications, and Communications Physics. And Nature Methods would be Nature Communications and Communications Biology, which are also the other two journals for Nature Genetics. So with the way that this works, the paper comes in through a manuscript tracking system that we've set up specifically for guided open access. One of the chief editors on the project assigns the paper to an editor in this stream. Now, they might be from any of the three journals, but whoever's the primary editor writes up their notes, gives their recommendation about its suitability for each of the three journals. And as long as it is suitable for at least one journal, it goes out to review. And then at the end, the editors from all three journals come together to build this report. So the report contains quite a lot of information. So importantly, it includes the editor's evaluation of the paper sort of as they saw it before review, and then their summary and synthesis of the reviewer reports. And then it breaks it down as is shown here, for each of the three journals, and gives a very specific recommendation, either that it's been invited for major revisions, minor revisions, or it's not invited at all. And the editors write up some specific notes to explain their recommendation. We also include the reviewer reports, and for each of the reviewer comments that we think is particularly important for the authors, the editors can annotate that and give the authors some guidance, basically. Like, for example, this experiment is required for publication at Journal X, but Journal Y would not require this. And then the authors can kind of make an informed decision about which journal they want to go to after review. And then the final part of the editorial assessment report is the open access or open research evaluation, which includes information on how best to share their data, which data would be mandatory to share, reporting, transparency recommendations, comments about the statistical analysis. So it's fairly comprehensive. And the idea is that if the authors decide at the end of the day that they don't want to publish in one of their journals, that this recommendation will help them to publish in another journal somewhere. All right, so there were some bumps along the road in implementing this. Of course, it was very much a change to how we normally work in very separate journals, where the focus is really on what's best for the journal. Let's publish the best papers for the journal, changing that focus to what's best for the author and can we find the best journal for this author. And then, of course, making sure that editors understand the goals and the ethos of the pilot, and externally making sure that we are articulating very well the added value and benefits to authors, institutions, and funders. So we did meet with funding bodies before we launched the pilot. They were all very positive. Authors have also been pretty positive. They like the time-saving aspect of it. They really like the editorial assessment report. And then I won't go into any details here, but of course there were technical hurdles to overcome with getting payment set up and everything like that. So we have started publishing papers from the pilot. When I made this slide, I think there were 3, but there are more now. And when the paper is published, there's this peer review information section that will mention that it went through guided open access. And if the authors agree, the editorial assessment report is published as supplementary information. And so far, they have all agreed for that. All right, so what have we learned? We have learned that the pilot does succeed as a proof of concept, but there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done to scale it up. Authors are very positive about the editorial assessment report. We've also found that guided open access is really attractive to consortia and large collaborations, wherein they can set up sort of outside of the journals that I showed you. We have some additional trials set up with other journals that are using the guided open access platform to coordinate publication of papers within a consortium project. And that's actually been really interesting. And we found that the collaborative editorial model that we set up works, but of course, like anything else, it can be refined. So where are we going? We want to make sure that authors, researchers are aware of guided open access as an option. We're going to explore whether we can expand this through, across the Nature portfolio. And then, of course, we continuously refine the editorial assessment report. So the versions that you see published are older versions. And if you actually look at the papers as we publish them, you'll see it evolving over time. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Brooke. That was very interesting. And I see some questions are coming in. We keep that for the end. So that's why I'm now handing over to William, who will talk to us about file stage and Thieme's experience with it, and then followed by, of course, Kathrin's presentation.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for being here at this event. What I'd like to go through during this first 5 minutes of the presentation is the methodology that Select Crowd Review uses, while Kathrin will go through the experience on the ground with Thieme. Let me just quickly go through the slides. So, Select Crowd Review enables the intelligence of the crowd to review scientific papers faster and better. So what does this statement mean? Well, the reason why Select Crowd Review was invented, was put in place, was to address bias, speed, transparency, timeline control, engage reviewers, and at the end of the day, achieve a better research article. How does it work? Well, the first step is one for a journal editor to invite and appoint a hand-picked crowd of experts for a long-term review collaboration. Generally speaking, crowds might be in the region of 70 to 100. And this is probably the most time-consuming element of the process, and that will take probably a month or two to gather this crowd. And what you ask in the crowd is to contribute over a long period of time to the reviewing of the articles, of the papers that will be then selected for publishing. Of course, we don't expect all of these 75 crowd members to have continuously each week time and the competence to review each paper. So the process is self-selecting. So once this is in place, the editors share for each paper a link that will enable the reviewers to access the paper. At that point, reviewers anonymously will have the possibility to comment, evaluate the paper online, and interact with each other's comments and discuss different viewpoints. Editors always have a clear and updated overview of this process. And the image that just has come up is an example of a paper at the center of the image. And the blue dots indicate where the comments have been placed on the left-hand side. You see there's a level of interaction between the different reviewers. At the end of this process, the anonymous comments can be exported as a PDF, and they're sent back to the authors for further improvements. So what happens in terms of benefits and the outcome? Well, the review process can be shortened down to 72 hours per cycle. The reviewers are engaged in a stimulating process, and it reduces the workload per reviewer as they are feeding off information or interacting, agreeing or disagreeing with the different viewpoints expressed on the platform. And it eliminates that disproportionate amount of time invested in finding and chasing the peer reviewer. I'll now pass on the presentation to Kathrin that will give you more stats and detail.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, William. Let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you, Manuel. Thank you, William. And of course, many thanks to the organizers of this conference. I think it's really interesting. I like the topics, and I'm looking forward to all the talks today and the next days. Yeah, so my name is Kathrin Ulbrich, and I work as executive editor for the Thieme Chemistry journals. And I have been responsible for crowd review at Thieme for the last couple of years now. I hope you got an idea now of how a crowd review works, and yeah, William explained what it is, and I just want to give you a little bit more insights, details about our experiences as a publisher and some data, some observations we made. Okay, I'll skip this one. Okay, so these are the journals in Thieme where we are currently using crowd review, and we started with Synlett. And actually, I haven't planned to talk about this, how it was invented and who invented it and everything. But yeah, last week something really interesting happened, really exciting happened. And yeah, so it was like this. The original idea for crowd review came from our editor-in-chief of Synlett, Ben List. And I think in 2016, if I remember correctly, we also did the first experiments in Synlett. And just last week, yeah, it was announced that Ben List has won the Nobel Prize for chemistry. And yeah, we couldn't be more excited and more happy for him. Yeah, so I have picked two of his publications for you here on the bottom about or regarding crowd review. And the first one appeared in 2017 in Nature. It's called Crowd-Based Peer Review Can Be Good and Fast. And it's about the first experiments that happened in Synlett. And then there was another one that appeared in 2021 in Synlett, How and Why Crowd Reviewing Works. And yeah, this is about the newer results and observations. Yeah, I can, if you want, I can post these references later in the chat. Okay, I just had to talk about this. Okay, back to the original topic. So we started with Synlett, and then 2 or 3 years later, we also implemented in Synopen. Synlett and Synopen are both chemical journals, and then we expanded crowd review also to some of our medical journals. Rufo followed, and then International Journal of Sports Medicine, and then just recently we implemented it in Applied Clinical Informatics. So here on this slide, I just wanted to give you an impression of how this crowd looks like. And this is the Synlett crowd. At the moment, I think we have 200 members, but it's split into 2 crowds, so it's not getting too big. Yeah, what we can see is that it covers many age groups. Okay, I have to admit it's a little bit more on the younger side. Different countries, and I think most importantly, we have people or chemists on different career levels. From academia or also from industry, and I think this is one of the great strengths of crowd review, that we have people with different experience and knowledge levels working together, collaborating to review a paper. And I think, yeah, it's great because this knowledge can build on each other, and yeah, and I think it is also, yeah, I would say it's also a great learning experience for the younger generation. So yeah, on this slide here, yeah, what we of course ask ourselves is what about the quality? Is crowd review, is it stricter? Is it less strict? Is it as thorough as the traditional peer review process? And yeah, I don't have too much time to talk about this, but maybe we can focus just on this this diagram here with the gray and green bars. So what we did, we reviewed papers simultaneously with select crowd review and normal peer review, and we just looked at the yeah, recommendations they gave, and yeah, what we observed is that the crowd, it looks like it's almost a little bit stricter. So they usually never gave a direct accept recommendation. They, in most cases, they ask for revisions, and maybe, yeah, they even rejected it a little bit, or gave reject recommendations a little bit more. And this in combination with, yeah, we also looked at the reviews itself, and we could compare them. And yeah, from our perspective or from our observations, is that crowd review is definitely at least as thorough as the traditional peer review process. Yeah, here on the slide, is this graph shows the development of crowd review over the last couple of years in Synlett. And in Synlett, authors can choose if they want to have crowd review or if they want to have their papers reviewed by the normal peer review process. And the blue, the blue graph actually it shows the authors choosing crowd review, and you can see we have approximately between 40 and 50% of authors choose now crowd review, and I think you can see that it's increasing. The acceptance of crowd review is increasing in Synlett. The dotted line is just the actually performed crowd reviews, because it's lower because there's of course desk rejects and things like that. But you can see it's increasing over the years. Okay, so this is my last slide, and I think it's important because this is one of the major benefits for our authors, and that is that we can publish their papers faster. So if you look at the left side here, this is the actual review time where we send the papers to review and then get them back. And as you can see, for normal peer review, that's the green bar. It's approximately 10 days on average, and this can be done with crowd review in 4 days, or in Synopen even only 2 days. And of course, this has also an effect on the total publication time. As you can see here on the right side, this is all Synlett. Until first decision and final decision, you can see the publication times is decreased. And and I think it's also very it's nice for our editors who send the manuscript to reviewers, because it's much easier to invite the crowd because they're always there. You just send it to them, they do the review, you get it back. With individual reviewers, you often have the problem that they decline, or they don't answer at all, or they answer after 5 weeks. And with the crowd, it's just a much easier and quicker process. So I think this is nice, and also the consistency regarding the time is improved. So for normal reviews or individual reviewers, it takes sometimes from 3 days up to 50 days. With crowd review, it's a very narrow time range from 3 to 6 days, for example. So I think these are the main benefits for us. Okay, I hope this gave you a little bit more insight into how crowd review works with our journals, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathrin. Thank you very much. I've just seen actually two questions popping up for you, and of course, so one is actually by Anne, and the other one by Michael Willis. So for the Select Crowd Review, reviewers, do you provide them with the same guidelines as you give reviewers under the usual mode in terms of your expectations of how they should review? And Anne also asked, how do you screen for conflict of interest for reviewers in the crowd?
Okay, so we have the same expectation as for normal reviewers. For us, this crowd review it's kind of the same as normal review. They just do it as a group together, and of course they have to answer the same questions. They have to keep the same ethics and everything. It's just the same, just with on a different platform or in a different form, I would say. And to the second question, what was it? Conflict of interest. Yeah. So, of course, if there is, I mean, we get, when we receive papers, we get notified sometimes of conflict of interest, or we see, is the author in the crowd, or are they from the same institute or something? Of course, this can be checked because we know all the reviewers in the crowd. When they apply for the crowd, they usually send me their CV, and they are all chemists. Usually we require them to have at least a PhD in chemistry. Yeah, and if there's some conflict, we can always check the lists of our people. Yeah, does this answer the question?
Hope so. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
There was also an earlier question by Dawn, who asked for. I think it's a question for Anne. So it's for the presenters, or for the community review. Is there any competition between the journals? And if so, how do you account for or alleviate that?
Yeah, we actually haven't seen competition between journals. It's actually been really great. It's a very collegial journal environment, and we actually know that it's up to the authors in the end to decide where they want to publish the paper. And we had the really great experience very recently where an author got an option of both cancer cell and immunity, and we're like, you get to choose what you want to do, and they made their choice, and it was like cool. We're just happy that they had that option. So we haven't seen competition between journals. Like, we had anticipated, would one journal say, hey, you need to do X to be published, in another journal like, well, you can do Y. We haven't seen that at all. It's really, it's kind of like, okay, let's see what the authors want to do, and that's kind of, we let them guide the decisions, because in the end, it's their paper.
And also, Brooke actually wanted to know, and if the editor, the community review editors, are dedicated full time to the community review, or also split time between individual journals.
Right. Yeah. For the community review, this pilot, we've been. So I work at Cell, but I took the year off, so I'm full time at the community, and same with my colleagues. We're community editors full time, so we're acting journal agnostically. And it's really funny I'm reading a paper differently than when I'm reading it for one journal alone. It's really like you look at the paper and you think about, okay, where does this potential? Where could it go? And so it's really interesting. And we'll see if that's something that we can maintain, because that is something that it would require additional people. And it takes effort. And we do know that the journal editors could also do something similar to what you're doing at the Guide to Open Access, because for there you guys are full-time editors for your journals as well. So this is just additional papers to your workflow. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, Brooke, while you were mic on, there was a question by Megan McDavid. How's the report compiled? Is it an automatic process? How do you compile the editorial report overall?
Oh yes, all the editors wish it was an automatic process. It's very manual. Some of it, so we have some standard text for the open research section. The editor can go through and see what the issues are with the paper, and like tick the boxes, and then they get the text for that specific issue. But otherwise, it is very much manual. That's another thing that we're hoping we can refine, I guess, going forward. I don't think it can ever be fully automated, because the point is to give a personalized experience to the reviewers. But I think that we can make it easier to compile the report.
Okay, I think we have time for. I'll combine this in one more question. So there's a question by maybe for William. So there's a question by Rachel Anderson and also by Simone Lache. So how do you, in crowd review, how do you get around the problem if not all of the people reviewing being experts, in the subject of a particular paper? And linked to that, are you expected as a crowd review member to contribute a certain number per year, or?
Yes, we collected statistics on this subject. Let's say out of 130 that we analyzed over a period of 5 months, we noticed that 90 were contributing with a different degree of collaboration. I mean, one would contribute to as many papers as possible. Others, I would say, on average, once every 2-3 months. So that's you have to see that the overall dynamics of a crowd is very different from one of the individual invitation, because you will have had the time to brief the crowd. And over time, there is a certain element of policing and unlearning of the rules of engagement. So you will not get a crowd member contributing to the paper if they're not, they don't have sufficient knowledge in that particular sector. Of course, if your paper is multidisciplinary, you will need to create several different crowds, because of course you can't sort of start sending invitations to review on subjects that are very far from their core knowledge. So multidisciplinary means several crowds as part of that journal.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We're running out of time now. So let me just conclude by saying this was a fantastic session. Thank you for all your questions. And thank you to the speakers. Thank you, Kathrin, William, Brooke, and Anne. And of course, I hope you'll be able to answer some questions maybe that still pop up in the chat. And please join the speed networking session following now. And there's also a session on materials design analysis reporting framework starting after the networking session. So yeah, stay tuned. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.